afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll also try and keep my comments short. I've submitted a written statement. My name is Steve Mirkin. I'm practicing as a criminal defense lawyer for over 35 years. Currently working for the New Hampshire Public Defender, but I'm appearing today as an individual, not on behalf of that agency. New Hampshire, I'm here to tell you, is an exceptional state. I lived here, worked here for a while, and in 1989, my wife persuaded me to move back to her home state of Kentucky. And I spent the next 25 years trying to persuade her to move back here, and finally 3 years ago we did. I've lived in 5 states, there's no place I'd rather be than here. Very happy to be here.
Where in Kentucky?
Well, lived in Louisville, worked all over the state. But being exceptional does not make us perfect. Not at all. We don't have a lot of differences between ourselves and every place else in the country. We've heard the prosecutor from Texas, we've heard the FBI man from California, we've heard Mr. Crone, who was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned and sentenced to death in Arizona. We've heard of the 156 individuals who have been exonerated around the country after having been sentenced to death. One of those was in Kentucky, at least. And so it kind of begs the question, well, how does this happen? What are the factors that go into it? We've heard reference to some of them already. Mr. Millsap from Texas talked about eyewitness identification, how we all inherently believe that that's the most reliable kind of evidence there is, except that the scientific body of work that's being developed shows us it's absolutely not. 75% of the wrongful convictions that resulted in exoneration involved a mistaken eyewitness identification. One thing that nobody has talked about to this point is the use of jailhouse informants. That goes on in every state in the country. It goes on here. The prosecution brings in a guy who was locked up with the guy on trial who said, yeah, while we've been locked up, we got to talking, and he told me that he really did it. That is a very, very common factor in wrongful convictions around the country. I've had it happen here. In New Hampshire, we had an individual, I made some reference to it in my written statement, whom the state of New Hampshire sought to call as, by that point, their only witness in a first-degree murder case. And fortunately, we were able to do some research, and we found a sympathetic federal parole officer who steered us in the right direction. It turned out that this guy had blazed a path literally from coast to coast throughout the federal system, testifying against people he'd been locked up with in exchange for whatever he could get. A better cell, moving to a new, less secure, lower security prison. Anything. The state of New Hampshire was prepared to use him in a first-degree murder case. Eventually, a judge found him not credible. Junk science. Mr. Millsap made reference to that. There's been some other references to it. We've heard about hair analysis that used to be relied on. I don't know if anybody happened to glance at this morning's Boston Globe. A man in Springfield, Mass. is getting a new trial after 30 years in prison, convicted of a rape he's insisted all along he did not commit, and sent there on the strength of a microscopic hair analysis comparison. That is now widely viewed as junk science. He's getting a new trial. Very fortunate it was Massachusetts, not a death penalty jurisdiction. I've heard reference to Cameron Todd Willingham, who one of the police officers testified that there's been no documented case of an innocent person put to death. The only reason that Cameron Todd Willingham's case has not been documented is because the governor of Texas canceled a hearing at which arson experts from around the country were prepared to come in and do exactly that, testify that the arson science signs and quotes, that convicted him of the murders of his 3 children was invalid, and that subsequent analysis of that evidence showed beyond a doubt that the fire was an accidental electric fire. There wasn't a crime. You can't tell that the camera's out of the way because he's dead. Another thing that's not been talked about here that I see and have seen a lot over the years, I've seen this in death penalty cases that I've been involved in Kentucky. You have 2 or 3 participants in the crime. How do you know which one did the killing, which one pulled the trigger? You don't. The only people who know are those who were there. What happens? The state makes a deal with one, who's the first one to say, hey, I'll take a deal, and I'll tell you, I'll testify, the other guy did. I've been on both sides of that. I've had clients for whom we made that deal. I've had clients for whom the other guy made the deal, and we had to deal with it. In the end, one gets death, or New Hampshire, because I've been on both sides of it in this state too, one gets life without parole, the other gets paroled. How do we know that the deal was made with the right individual as opposed to the one who put his hand up first and got a deal? You never know. In my career, I've represented one individual who was found guilty in a death penalty case and sentenced to death. I've represented him 3 times, but he's been tried, actually by now he's been tried I think 6 times, which is a whole different story of how much the Commonwealth of Kentucky has spent on that. But that was one of those cases. The charge is that he and another individual committed a murder. The other guy, the minute he was caught, put his hand up and said, don't give me death and I'll tell you what happened. And for, oh gosh, it's been going on 25 years now. He has maintained, wasn't me, it was the other guy. I didn't want to kill him, not me. Nobody will ever know. There is no forensic proof as to which one pulled the trigger. Nobody will ever know. But the Commonwealth of Kentucky has grabbed a hold of this guy who, I might add, was already doing life from another state when he escaped. They grabbed a hold of his testimony. We have, one of the reasons I wanted to come back here for so long is that we do have an excellent criminal justice system here. We have knowledgeable judges, we have well-trained attorneys on both sides, we have well-trained police. We like to think that the things that happen in Texas or Oklahoma or Florida won't happen here. I don't know Mr. Buchanan, who we've heard reference to today, he might beg to differ. Nobody is immune from these kinds of mistakes. One of the things that makes New Hampshire exceptional is that we know, at least since 1939, we have not executed an innocent person. There's only one way that we can continue going forward to say that and be sure of it. Passing this bill will help us be in that position to be able to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. Senator Lasky has a question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Have you ever been involved in a case where a police officer has been killed?
So a police officer has been killed. No. I've been involved in cases where police officers have been shot. The one I mentioned, the client of mine who ended up on death row, among the accusations against him are that he fired 2 shots at a police officer, fortunately not hitting. Involved in the officer's killed.
Yes. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. The chair will call